Hey everybody, JCB here with The Awesomest, and you're watching a brand new series I'm calling Why Not? As in, why not do this terrible idea? We live in a world of remakes, reboots, sequels, and prequels, and while I'm very happy to be able to revisit some of my favorite franchises from my childhood, like Jurassic Park, Star Wars, even Full House, come on, new Perfect Strangers series. While some franchises should absolutely be revisited, other franchises shouldn't. So why not Ghostbusters? I actually didn't want to make this video. I mean, I've been planning to do a show like this since I first started the channel. In fact, my first video ever was all about Ghostbusters. Don't get me wrong, I love talking about Ghostbusters, but I was actually in the middle of making another video when I saw the trailer for the new Ghostbusters movie had come out, and I felt compelled to talk about it. So despite the fact that I have a lot of videos in the pipeline that I need to finish, and I wasn't really planning on dropping everything to do this, here we are. That said, the new trailer for the Ghostbusters movie was released yesterday, and it's... well, yeah. I'm not one of those people who freaked out when I first heard the new Ghostbusters movie was going to feature an all-female cast. Gender swapping doesn't really make a big difference, and it's probably one of the most over-exaggerated gimmicks of filmmaking today. You can gender swap pretty much any movie and it won't make any difference. I mean, unless of course this topic is a gender-specific issue or experience like rape or pregnancy or something like that. But if you cast Bridesmaids with all men and called it Groomsmen, it wouldn't really be a different movie. And the other new Ghostbusters movie they're making that's starring Channing Tatum isn't going to be any less terrible just because they're all guys. My point is there weren't a bunch of dick jokes in the original Ghostbusters, so the idea that them all being women now will somehow rob the series of any male-centric humor is kind of dumb. In fact, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that this movie will probably have more dick jokes than this movie ever did. And that's part of the problem. Modern comedies today are really stupid and lazy and just bad. There really hasn't been a decent comedy in a long time. When I first heard they were making a new Ghostbusters movie, I wasn't concerned about the news that it was gonna be an all-female cast. I was concerned they were going to make it Bridesmaids with ghosts. And after seeing this trailer, that seems to be exactly what they're going for. Look, that ghost just projectile vomited slime all over her. That's funny because gross. Kinda like the poop scene in Bridesmaids. Remember when they all had to poop? That was funny because poop. Bill Murray was slimed in the original Ghostbusters, but it wasn't really vulgar. Slimer just passed through his body the way he would a wall and left a slimy residue. Peter wasn't puked on, and he didn't start talking about slime running down his butt crack.
That stuff went everywhere, by the way, in every crack.
And when modern comedies aren't reducing themselves to poop jokes, they're just standing there talking in the most boring cinematography imaginable. To really understand this concept, I suggest you check out Every Frame a Painting. It's a YouTube channel ran by a guy named Tony, and it's really good. I suggest you go over there and check out the video about Edgar Wright specifically, as it touches on this issue in more detail than I could ever get into here.
These movies aren't movies. They're lightly edited improv. Everyone stands still and talks at each other in close-up.
Another thing about modern movies in general that makes them by and large suck is an overdependence on a MacGuffin. A MacGuffin is an object or person in the movie that serves as a central source of the conflict. Think the Tesseract in the Avengers. It's the thing that has to be either obtained or destroyed in order to stop the bad guy. It's basically a lazy plot device. The original Ghostbusters didn't have a MacGuffin. There was no magic talisman that had to be destroyed, or a book with a spell that had to be chanted. At the heart of Ghostbusters was the idea that humans could overcome anything, even supernatural beings that claimed to be gods with enough brain power and can-do spirit.
We had the tools, we had the talent. It's Miller time.
Apparently in Ghostbusters 3, and let's drop the bullshit, it's Ghostbusters 3. It takes place 30 years after the original, which means it takes place in the same universe after the fact. That makes it a sequel. The Amazing Spider-Man was a reboot. Batman Begins was a reboot. This is a sequel. This is Ghostbusters 3. Apparently in Ghostbusters 3, there's some device that's amplifying paranormal activity.
Someone is creating a device that amplifies paranormal activity.
Destroy the device, save the world. MacGuffin. The fact that they had to resort to this type of plot device speaks to the larger problem of the Ghostbusters franchise. It's a one-trick pony. Proton packs do one thing. They work the same way every time, and for the logic of the movie, the ghosts all respond to the proton packs in the exact same way. So how do you make a climactic ending when you've already seen the Ghostbusters busting ghosts throughout the entire film? In the case of the original, you introduce a very dangerous side effect of crossing the streams, and then you call back to it at the end as a last resort. This way you get a bit of suspense, there's a sense of danger, you really get the idea that these guys are ready to sacrifice themselves in order to save the world. And then you have a narrow escape and a big explosion. It's a perfect ending to a movie like this. But where do you go from there? Once you've done the crossing the streams, what's left? And once you've told the origin story, what's next? Not a whole lot. Which is why Ghostbusters 2 felt so lackluster and why this new movie is yet another origin story. Of course, I will reserve final judgment until I see the actual movie, but this new trailer does not look very promising. The tone is just completely off, which leads me to one of the bigger reasons why nobody should ever make a Ghostbusters movie. Harold Ramis is dead, and Ghostbusters should have died with him. Now, I know a lot of people credit Dan Aykroyd as being the creator of Ghostbusters because it was largely his baby, but this is another George Lucas situation. The original idea that Dan Aykroyd came up with was unmakeable. It was a hodgepodge of weird ideas that would have cost way too much money to make, and no studio would have touched it. Dan Aykroyd's original idea was about futuristic space travelers who fight ghosts. Space ghosts. Dan Aykroyd wanted space ghosts. But where most people would have looked at the script and said no thank you, Harold Ramis saw the potential and brought the story back down to earth and put the focus back on the main characters. And that's really the biggest difference. Harold Ramis really set the tone for the original Ghostbusters and made it the film we all know and love. There's no real punchlines or zingers in Ghostbusters. It's all based on the charisma and the interactions between these exact actors at this exact time in history, which is perhaps the most important reason why nobody should try to make a new Ghostbusters movie. The success of the original film came about almost entirely because of where it was set and the specific actors who were in the starring role. By the specific setting, I mean 1980s New York. The city is a different place now. The country is a different place now. The Reagan years really set the stage for the human antagonist of the film in a way that just wouldn't make sense today. And as for these specific actors, I don't just mean Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Ernie Hudson, and Harold Ramis. I mean specifically 1984's version of Dan Aykroyd, Bill Murray, Ernie Hudson, and Harold Ramis. With all due respect, putting those same actors in those same roles today wouldn't work out as well. It's like if you tried making Harrison Ford go back and play Indiana Jones again. It would be terrible.
Part-time.
Those comedians in that moment of history were the cream of the crop, and the fact that they were all friends and colleagues and worked together to craft the script both before production and while the film was being made really set the tone of that film. It was capturing lightning in a bottle. It was one of those situations where all of the pieces just perfectly fell into place. You can't just throw 4 funny people onto a set and expect magic. Even the same 4 people in the same roles a few years later couldn't do it. Ghostbusters 2 proved beyond the shadow of a doubt that the magic of the original can't just be duplicated. Bill Murray had the right idea when he refused to do any new Ghostbusters movies that weren't as good as the original. Nobody should. But the bottom line is people who are freaking out about this movie being Rule 63 are dumb. There are likely going to be far bigger problems with this film, and I hope getting wrapped up in the gender politics of movie making doesn't distract from having an honest conversation about where this movie succeeds and where it falls short. And I hope it does succeed. I hope it's a good movie. I hope it fits right in place tone-wise with the other 2 films, and this is just a really bad trailer. I personally like Kristen Wiig, and I can't stand Melissa McCarthy, but at least in this movie she doesn't seem to be basing her character off someone she saw shopping at Walmart. If nothing else, I'm sure this movie will accomplish exactly what it set out to do. I just hope that's not Bridesmaids with Ghosts. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more like it, be sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure you check out Tony's channel, Every Frame a Painting. I'll have a link in the description below. If you want more Ghostbusters content, you can check out my very first video, 6 Odd Things About Ghostbusters. And until next time, keep being awesome.